far to walk. This walk will take roughly an hour. There is again the possibility.
We don't have any sheep on the island.
Biggest illegally built building in Sweden ever, the town wall of Visby. As I told you down at the harbour, they started to build the first part of the town wall around the harbour around 1150, 1200, something like that. The upper part here was built around 1250. And it's a little bit funny because, I mean, there were Gotlanders in the city, Gotlandic people in the city, there were Gotlandic people out here, and they built a wall more or less in between here. That was not very popular to the Gotlandic people living outside of the city, because at the same time as they built the wall, they started to take a tax from the people who wanted to go into the city and sell the goods. So they had to pay tax to come into their own city. And in the end, the following thing that happened was that we got a civil war in the year 1288 between the Gotlandic people living outside and the people in the city. At that time, okay, we had a lot of Germans also living in the city. Half of the population in the city was roughly German and half was Gotlandic. But still there were a lot of Gotlandic people living in there as well. So it was a civil war between the city and the people outside. The fight between the two armies wasn't here in Visby. It was at a place called Roma. It's about 20 kilometers east of Visby, where the Gotlandic Alting, the people who at that time then ruled Gotland, had their seat. The Gotlandic army lost, really lost, because exactly like what happened 1361 when Valdemar Atterdag came, the Gotlandic people that were fighting against these other armies, they were just normal farmers. They had absolutely no clue about warfare. They couldn't really fight, they didn't have really good weapons. But the army from the city, it was an army of mercenaries, well-trained soldiers who knew exactly what to do and how to do it. So the Gotlandic people had absolutely no chance. But before this started, they had sent an envoy to Stockholm, to the King of Sweden, to get his help, because 1288. Because, as I said, we paid a small tribute to the King of Sweden to get his protection if we had a problem. So he came here himself, but only after the war was over and the fight was finished. But he came here anyway, and the first thing then what he saw was the town wall. And he said, wow, this is illegal. Because at that time you were not allowed to fortify a city without the permission of the king. So the people of Visby had to pay a big fine to the King of Sweden for building a city wall without his permission. But at the same time the king was so impulsed by the wall and just the thought that he suddenly had a fortified city within his area. So at the next day he wrote the papers and said, now Visby is a city. Before that we didn't have the papers that we were a city, but now after that we got the papers. So 1288 Visby got the real papers that we became a city. A fortified city, and it was allowed. After that the people of Visby continued to rebuild and build these town walls. You can see now here on the right side, you can see the old walls, you can see the openings where they were earlier than standing to shoot with their bows and so on. They are filled up with stones, and then they have raised the top of the wall with roughly 3-4 meters. And that was done around 1320, 1340, something in that direction. At the same time they also built big standing towers and also the small saddle towers hanging on the top of the wall. This is a piece of engineering to be done, because these saddle towers, they have to be absolutely at the top of the wall, because otherwise they get the weight one way or the other. Mostly they manage very, very well, the engineers, to do this, but sometimes you can see here on the left they were not so successful. Here one of those saddle towers has fallen down and taken part of the wall with it. And further on you can see one of the saddle towers now supported by big iron beams so that it shouldn't fall down. The last parts to be built here at the toll wall were done in the 19th century, and this is this stone thing that comes out here. They had canoes placed there at that time trying to protect the city. So the town wall has been a part of the protection of the city of Visby until the 19th century, or part into the 19th century. From the beginning, the town wall was plastered white. It was smooth on the side, so you couldn't, of course, climb it. And these graves you have here in between are just the stone quarries. The quarries where they took the stones, because you can see the limestone here. Everything on Gotland is made built up of limestone, and they just broke the limestone here and made the wall. And at the same time, they got these ditches in between. They were never filled with water, but they of course made it very difficult for any aggressor to move heavy machinery up to the town wall. So that's what more or less what they used it for. The experts think that the area out here where we are standing now looks more or less the same in the medieval time as it does today. This was a grazing area for the animals, because in the city they had their horses and they had their cows and their goats and so on, and they had them out here to graze just outside the city wall, of course. So then we'll walk in to the gate.